you can see that the AI bots are winning, you're losing. Humanity is doomed in that regard, in that scenario.
Michael Saylor holds the belief that Bitcoin serves a dual purpose, safeguarding against wealth confiscation and devaluation, while also acting as a hedge against the potential consequences of artificial intelligence. In a recent conversation, Saylor expressed his views on the ongoing banking crisis and the impending state ownership of money. He envisions that Bitcoin will play a pivotal role in reshaping the financial landscape, particularly in light of the significant repercussions arising from currency devaluation. Saylor asserts that while powerful nation-states may hold onto their fiat currencies for a while, many countries will eventually experience the collapse of their own monetary systems. Be sure to stay tuned until the end of the video, where Saylor discusses the intersection of Bitcoin and artificial intelligence, and why this intersection could hold the key to preserving humanity.
If you have $1 million of property in the state and you live in it, you pay $20,000 a year, and then they reassess the property up if you're not a citizen, which means that over the course of about 25 years, you have to have $1 million to pay taxes on $1 million of property you own. If you started with $1 million, you have nothing, you see, after 25 years. The old axiom in America is they lost the family farm because they couldn't afford the taxes on it. When I was growing up, people told us a story, we just nodded our heads and we just kind of accepted that as a given. Well, of course, and the establishment would like you to believe that there's something morally wanting about the grandchildren that couldn't afford to pay the tax on the family farm. They must be lazy, or they must be less virtuous than their grandparents that could afford to buy the farm. But if you think about it, you're like, why is it that your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren will be poor and they'll lose everything that you worked your entire life to get just because of the passage of time? But over the course of 100 years, the way the political system is constructed, all of the money that you work for will be transferred from your family to the state, either by inheritance taxes, property taxes, or inflation, one way or the other. And that's been normalized somehow. But if you think about what happens when you go from visible stationary property, which invites looting, to invisible mobile property, Bitcoin is invisible mobile property. Nobody knows you have it. And if you made it in one city, you can move it to a different city, a different state, a different country. Right? And so there's something fundamentally different here. When an ambitious person, a politically powerful, ambitious person, meets someone with a lot of money that can't run, their reaction is, let's tax them and take it because it's unfair that they have it and I don't. And sometimes they just want it, and sometimes they go, it's unfair that this wealthy person has it and there's someone that isn't wealthy like them, so I'm going to tax it as a public service and I'm going to redistribute it from the person that has it to the person that doesn't have it. And of course, I'll give myself a cut in the middle. That is the status quo since the beginning of time. But of course, when an ambitious, powerful person encounters someone that has a bunch of wealth that's invisible, that's mobile, instead of viewing them with contempt, they're viewed with respect. In fact, in that case, they realize that if they hold a gun to their head, the property just goes away. They're not going to get it, right? First of all, you don't even know how much there is, right? So if you knew how much the person had, you might be able to get half with a gun to their head. But if you don't know how much they have, statistically, you'll get 10%. And then, of course, if they can simply leave with their property, then it's very difficult for you to steal people's invisible property that's moving at the speed of light, you see. So in that case, you think, well, perhaps I have to be civil with them and cooperate. And so mobile digital property invites civility and cooperation. Stationary physical property invites violence and corruption. And if you want an example in the real world where you can see this put to the test, look at the policies of Singapore and the UAE and compare them to the policies in certain states in the United States or certain parts of the US and then Western Europe. And of course, what you'll see is in Singapore and the UAE, they have zero income tax, very low tax rates, and they welcome foreigners. Because if they had massive taxes, no one would take their billions of dollars of property to Singapore, would they? They don't need to. They're trying to attract liquid capital by being civil and cooperative. Whereas you go to, states like New York, California, where they think that people sort of just have to stay there, the tax rates just keep going up and keep going up and keep going up. Same in lots of parts of Western Europe. And the more comfortable the politicians are that you can't leave, the higher the tax rate goes. So Bitcoin represents a lot of things. And one thing it represents is the separation of money and state. And a lot of people, they like it because they think, well, if the money is separated from the state can't print infinite money to fight endless wars. That's true. Another thing it represents is the separation of property from earth. And I think it's even a bigger, deeper concept, right? And the idea of separating property from earth is, if your property isn't stationary to a given physical jurisdiction, then you don't have to negotiate with the mayor, the governor, the president, and every regulator in the regime in order to just keep from losing your stuff every day of your life. And you see, if you study the history of the world, and you could pick any history, but I'll take the history of the United States. Read Rothbard's Conceived in Liberty. It's the story of every colony in the United States before the Revolutionary War. And it goes something like this. Some people showed up because they were being murdered and they were being looted by someone in Europe. They got to the US, they established their own property rights so they could have land. And then immediately some governor took over the colony and started regulating, stealing, and taxing and looting their property. So then they moved west or moved south, or then they toppled that governor. And over again, everywhere, the story is always the same. Somebody shows up, they want to find some property, they want to create a farm, they want to create a company. They start growing wheat, and then the governor decides to create a monopoly on baking of bread. And then the governor says it's illegal to bake bread with your wheat. You have to sell my bakery your wheat at a lower price. And then that governor or the governor's family that he or she married into, they have a monopoly on bread. They triple the price of bread. Everybody else has to pay too much for the bread. Someone complains. The government sends some soldiers to kick their door in. The people may or may not fight back. The story goes on. Then, a politician passes another law. You can't print books. You can't make hats. You can't cross from this side of the river to that side of the river. Whatever it is, you can't go up the Hudson River without paying a fee to me. It's always corruption, always monopoly, always taxation. There is no end to it. There never has been an end to it. There never will be an end to it as long as we are physical creatures and we live in the physical domain. So what is the appeal of Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is the digital transformation of property, the digital transformation of money, leading to the digital transformation of energy and matter, and then eventually the digital transformation of identity. If you can manifest something with substance in cyberspace, and if that something is protected with a private key, whether that something is your company, your property, your money, or your identity, you now have sovereignty in the form of the secret inside your head. When it comes time for my company, for my country to steal all your stuff, if your wealth is in my bank or in national banks in the form of the national currency, I can simply double the currency supply and steal half of everybody's property overnight without even admitting I did it, right? You just have 100% inflation. It's happening in Argentina. right now. It's happening lots of places in the world. So you've always got that option. And if you have assets in the form of a foreign currency or a security and they're with a centralized custodian, I just send a message to the custodian saying, convert all that back into the local currency, devalue it 10 to 1. And I've just done the same thing. I've done it overnight. If your property is in the form of land, I just put a property tax on it. You're not moving the land. If your property is in the form of a company, I just make it, maybe I put an excise tax or a value-added tax or some other tax on the thing that you want to sell, and that's how I take it. But if your property is digital property, and if you either have the option to put it with a custodian outside of your country, right? The beauty of, if you had $1 million building in a country in South America, it's not moving, but you could move $1 million of Bitcoin to hundreds of custodians in any country on earth, and you could move it every day. So you can kind of always, if Switzerland is the place you can trust, you move it there, and then a few years later, you can move it to London. A few years later, if you lose faith in the UK, you move it to the US, or you move it to Singapore, or you move it to UAE. Eventually, you put it on some big container ship floating in the middle of the Atlantic with a satellite uplink, right? You have a chance if you have a portable asset, and ultimately you have the option, just take self-custody and hold it yourself or put it in your head. Those are not options you have when you live in the physical domain. So when I say Bitcoin represents a separation of property and earth, what I'm really getting at is there's maybe $950 trillion of wealth in this world, and 350 trillion of it is real estate. Half of it is liquid capital or wealth people would like to move around. So 500 trillion, right? Bitcoin's only 400 billion. So we're talking about 1,000x that amount of wealth. 1,000x as much is trapped. It's trapped in the earth. When you own a company, when you own a building, when you own land, when you own a bar of gold, it's in the physical domain, which means you own it at the pleasure of a counterparty, a custodian, and a politician. And in fact, unfortunately, you own it at it's like there's 100 people in the world that can take it away from you. And as long as all 100 decide not to take it away from you this year, you get to keep it for one more year. That is the counterparty risk of everything else. And when you dematerialize that property, when you digitally transform it from land or a building or a company and you put it into cyberspace, you have escaped the counterparty risk from 100 different counterparties. People you don't even know. Like, there are people that started yoga studios in 2018 and they didn't know that one health official, maybe a health official in a state, would just decide to shut down their business and destroy their livelihood for whatever reason, right? Someone you may never have heard of that was not elected may just decide whether or not your property has any value. And that, unfortunately, is not a new story. It's been going on for 10,000 years.
Absolutely.
And you could write 10 million pages of histories of some innocent person that had their life and livelihood and liberty and pursuit of happiness wrecked by someone more powerful than them. Until Bitcoin. And Bitcoin's the first time where there's something that comes along where you might actually own something yourself that is beyond the reach of those that would do you harm economically or otherwise. And that's a pretty profound idea, which is what kind of keeps us all motivated, right? And so I think Bitcoin holds an extraordinary appeal because it is the most secure computer network in the world. And one application of the most secure computer network is to protect all the money in the world. And that's a useful one, I get it. The second thing the network does is it protects the identity and verifies the identity of everybody in the world that's ever done a transaction on it, including everybody with the money. right? If Satoshi wanted to say, hey, this is the secret biography of Satoshi and prove it, then they could sign that message or sign the document with their private key, and that would be proof. It's like, how do you come back from the dead after 1,000 years and prove that this was your thing? Right. And this is something that people in the art and the history world struggle with all the time, that the provenance of a piece of art or the provenance of a book. It's like, is that real? Is that a forgery? And, and I run a publicly traded corporation. So oftentimes we have a corporate resolution where we need to prove that we entered into the resolution, but we don't just publish it to the world. So it's a private thing that we do, but we need to timestamp it. So if you want to timestamp and hash an important resolution, I mean, think about it like a government order, a secret order, a military command, a court order, a corporate resolution, a last will and testament, or it could be just a cyber account logon. Like, how do I prove that I'm the CEO of MicroStrategy when I log into a new social network? Can you give me a way to prove it in 1 second? Right now, by the way, there is no way. There's no way for me to prove to any government on Earth and to any corporations on Earth in 1 second that I am the chairman of MicroStrategy. I haven't figured it out yet. I mean, think about that now. What if I could do it 1,000,000 times faster? I could do it 1,000,000 times faster. I just basically burn my public key and encrypt it with my private key on the Bitcoin base layer. And then I post that to my Twitter, and it's linked back to Bitcoin. It's an orange check. And now whenever I apply for any license, whenever I want to participate, if I send you a WhatsApp message, if you get a WhatsApp message from Michael Saylor, don't trust it, because there's 10,000 WhatsApp scammers that use my name. But here, if I orange checked it, then you would know it's me. And so Bitcoin actually represents an extraordinary opportunity, right? We talk about truth and consequence in cyberspace. The truth comes from the orange check. The consequence comes from the cost. So for example, if you wanted to spin up 100 million accounts and they're all going to say that they really love, Yo-Yo Cookies, the brand.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if they're not checked, then maybe they were just generated for nothing by an AI bot. But if you actually had 100 million orange check accounts, then the person spent at least $1. So at least $100 million was spent verifying those 100 million people. So when I'm voting for you for president of the United States, you would like to know that there are 100 million real people, or at the very least, someone spent $1 or so per identity. Now, because that's where the consequence comes into play. There's friction, and that means you can't just create 1 billion fake accounts an hour. Right? I mean, it's $1 billion an hour, right? To create 1 billion fake accounts an hour with the orange check, whereas without the orange check, it's just a little bit of electricity an hour. So if you really want to eliminate spamming and denial of service attacks and the like, then you do that. But the other thing is, if I catch you lying to me, like if there's 9,700 phishing attacks and they're all offering me a URL where I can go and get free Bitcoin, and it turns out that it steals or hacks my machine, you would like to report that, and then there ought to be a cost to the person that actually tried to steal your money. And right now there isn't. They create the accounts for free. So if they can create 100,000 accounts an hour, and it takes you 5 minutes to delete the account, you can see that the AI bots are winning, you're losing. Humanity is doomed in that regard, in that scenario. On the other hand, if they have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars an hour, and then when you report it, they lose the money forever. See, that's where the consequence comes into play. I used a physical analogy. I said, look, if you're walking down the street, and you see someone and you're rude to them, you might get punched in the face. So people oftentimes are a lot more polite in the real world than in cyberspace, where they kind of feel like they can say anything and get away with it. If I checked into your hotel room, and if I came to your hotel and I could check into all 10,000 rooms in the hotel, if I could trash them all, and I could simultaneously trash all the hotel rooms in every other hotel in the world at the same time, and I could do it for free, then, the mischievous, malefactor kind of has the upper hand, right? The hotel industry would come to a grinding halt. So in real world, it turns out that I can only check into one hotel room at a time. I can't move at the speed of light. It costs me a credit card or security deposit. And if I trash the one room, it costs me money. And it would take me all year to trash every room in the hotel. So it takes time and it takes energy, because the universe is conservative in that way. And so that's why the hotel industry works in the real world. And that's why so many things are so dreadfully broken in cyberspace. Because in cyberspace, they have too many free services where I can write a program to pretend that it's 18 million people. And it's really just one jerk. And it's one jerk burning $18 of electricity, doing $187,000 of damage to make $900. And that's what's wrong with cyberspace. So the way to fix it is just ask people to get a cyber passport and then register their passport on the Bitcoin base layer once in their life. It's not, paying $20 for a passport once in your life is not that expensive. It's just too expensive for an attacker or a impersonator or a criminal that wants to imitate 87 million people an hour. They're not doing it. And so it will block the malefactors from cyberspace. And so using Bitcoin this way, with this orange check, it's a way to secure cyberspace from your political enemies and from criminals and just from malicious actors. And I just don't think there's a future for the civilization if you can't secure cyberspace for everyone, whether it's for the children or for honest, law-abiding citizens. You've got to bring civility and safety to cyberspace. And right now, it's anything but safe or civil. It isn't, right? The only way you get to some semblance of civility is through authoritarian behavior by the big tech companies. They just unilaterally rip everything off the platform that they think is mildly threatening. But they're still not that good at it, and they still aren't going to block state intelligence actors or real committed criminals. And so that doesn't work, right? The answer is something cryptographically sound, thermodynamically sound, and that is Bitcoin in a nutshell.
Michael Saylor offers a fresh perspective on the imminent transformations within the financial sphere. He underscores Bitcoin's potency as a robust defense against wealth confiscation and devaluation, as well as its potential as a safeguard in the era of artificial intelligence. We've extensively examined the potential upheavals in the global currency landscape and how Bitcoin emerges as a resilient solution amidst the looming decline of fiat currencies in various nations. As promised, later in the video, we delve into the intricate connections between Bitcoin and artificial intelligence, initiating a dialogue that unveils possibilities for how these technologies might collaborate to safeguard humanity. For more Daily Dose Crypto news, check out these two awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.